Hello and welcome back to another episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, reminding you as always to click that subscribe button and the bell next to it so you will always be notified whenever a new episode comes live on our YouTube channel. If you're not watching or listening to us on YouTube, you can find us there, youtube.com/WJLive. It really doesn't get any easier than that, does it? You will always get the truth about the news of the day from us, from people you can trust. Today on the show, are women going to be drafted into the United States military? Well, commentator Olivia Brown has some new information about the possible answer to that question. And what about the recall election in California? We're starting to get some actual news about that process now. Should Gavin Newsom be worried? Former California resident, should I say recovering California resident, Cameron Arcand, and Western Journal contributor as well. He has that one for us. But first, last week, the Western Journal ran in its entirety coverage of an important Arizona Senate hearing that they live streamed. We carried it on our YouTube channel. Over 100,000 WJ Live viewers and Western Journal readers have watched that video since we posted it 8 days ago. Yesterday, I sat down with Arizona Senate President Karen Fann to talk about that hearing, to talk about the Arizona election audit in general, and what we know and what we don't know at this point. We're going to be publishing the entire video of that interview very shortly. In fact, when I walked into the studio, it was literally in the process of uploading to Rumble and to our YouTube channel. So you can go there when we're done here. I know you won't want to miss a second of this coverage on WJ Live. So when we're done here, you can go there and you can watch that entire interview there. But here's a very quick early look for you at one of the topics that Senator Fann and I talked about.
But what has been more of a challenge is the fact that Maricopa County has intentionally done everything in their power to sabotage it, to withhold information, to be less than honest with the public about this. And so it's created a huge problem. So as you can see, they're starting to stumble over their own words and not making sense. So along with that, so not only has the auditors had problems in us getting the information we can from Maricopa County, they have purposely, they withheld the blue tally sheets. We have not gotten the chain of custody. We have not gotten the routers, the passcodes, the fobs.
So I asked Senator Fann, because she said in that clip, as you heard, Maricopa County election officials were being, quote, less than honest. So a little later in that interview, I asked her, okay, what do you mean by that? Are they lying? Are Maricopa County election officials lying to Arizonans and, of course, the world, because everybody's watching the results of this audit? It's the first of its kind, really, in the nation. She, in response to that, gave me 3 examples of Maricopa County elections officials being dishonest with voters, and she summed up her answer to my question as, so, yes. Are they lying? Yes, according to the president of the Arizona Senate. Again, you can watch that entire interview as soon as it's live up on Rumble very, very shortly, and it'll be on our YouTube channel as well. So that was just a little taste. But so Cameron and Olivia, Senator Fann has been very adamant that the purpose of this audit is really about making sure we get it right in 2022 and 2024. That it's really not about trying to reverse the results of 2020. In fact, she told me some of the hurdles that would be involved in even trying to do that, and it's practically impossible to decertify the Arizona election results. It's not impossible. There is a process, but there's just there's lots of processes. Getting them to actually work is another matter. So it's not really what she's looking at is trying to make the next couple of elections run well in a state where Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden by fewer than 11,000 votes. So people need to really be able to trust those counts. So my question is, why would Maricopa County election officials resist that kind of effort? They've been resisting from the very beginning. They initially said we would help do an audit. They do a joint audit between the Senate and the county. State and county officials will work together to do that, and then they reneged on that and have really fought it tooth and nail ever since. Why? What possible motivation could local county officials have to resist those efforts? Cameron, any thoughts there?
Well, I'll say this first. I think if Maricopa County said from the beginning, we are flat out, no way, not complying to any sort of form of audit, that probably would have put this whole thing a more clear-cut spot than what they're doing right now, where they're giving bits and pieces of information. And that's going to be, in the end, that's going to create more issues than if they were just flat out no compliance whatsoever, or if there was full compliance. What they're trying to do right now is they're trying to kind of play fast and loose with this, where they're going to give a little bit here and there, but they're not actually going to give the full details of things. And I watched a good chunk of that interview, and whenever I praise a politician, I regret it a week later. So I'm probably going to regret saying that right now. But Karen Fann seems to be one of the more reasonable voices in this audit right now, this whole situation, whether it's someone for or against it, and they seem to understand what the purpose of it would be. Now, I totally understand that there are concerns of people having like Maricopa County could have been like, no, we're not having any private company touch this whatsoever. But the way that they are acting, where it's bits and pieces of info, like sending these things, that's where we're creating an issue. And whether it's in a workplace or on a governmental level, when you don't have clear communication, that's going to do a disservice to, in this case, it's the public. If you're looking at a company, it's the consumer. What we're seeing here is a clear lack of communication. And what Karen Fann is saying in this interview is, hey, if we complied on this, if we worked on this, we wouldn't have ran into these sorts of problems.
Yeah, that's right. The county initially said, "Oh, sure, we'll do an audit. We'll use these two companies to do it." So it's not about private companies. The problem is the two private companies that they suggested, neither is an auditing firm, and one of them was the one that certified the machines in the first place. So they're auditing their own work. And I even said to Senator Fann yesterday, "Look, auditing your own work is how I passed high school French. So I get the desire to do it, but that's not a good way to ensure election integrity." Olivia, what do you think? What's the motivation behind Maricopa County resistance here?
I'm not sure exactly what their motivation is for this. I really do think that Republicans and Democrats need to work together to make sure that we do have elections that are honest and that people can trust. I've worked in politics the last couple years, and I've seen a lot of people I do a lot of voter contact. When you knock on their door, they don't want to vote anymore because they don't trust it. And so we need people to be able to trust it. And I think that this audit is important because it will bring faith back to the voters. And whether, whatever way it goes, I think it's important for other states to use that in the future too. Like she said, this is the first one they've ever done, and it would be a blueprint for other states if they feel like they need to do that. I don't think it has to do with who won. It's important I think every election should be able to be audited. Sure.
Yeah. She said this was the first in the country like this, and from now on, any other state that wanted to do it would be easy as pie. That might be a bit of an exaggeration on her part. I'm not sure it's going to be that easy. But yeah, Arizona really is sort of blazing the trail in this, and I hope it's got some good results. Okay. It's time for America's favorite game show. Cameron, are you ready? I don't know that it's actually literally America's favorite game show, but it's my favorite game show, and I'm going to stand in for America at this point. We call it around here dumb or dishonest. So today, the contestant is a collective, Maricopa County elections officials. Dumb or dishonest, Cameron? Do they somehow think this resistance makes them look good in any way, i.e. they're dumb, or do they have something to hide? What do you think?
I'm going with dumb. I normally go with dumb on this one, but the reason why is there is a clear misunderstanding of what the goal is, because they're letting their view on the audit being driven by the public rather than the people actually conducting it. And the reason why I say that is there is a misconception, I believe, on what the end goal is. I think Maricopa County, I can almost empathize with this in the sense that I think they're concerned that this will lead to a greater distrust of the process in general, and they're thinking that this has something to do with overturning the results, whereas there's a difference between that and kind of what Karen Fann is saying with this. So I'm going to go with dumb on this one, because I think that I don't think they're actually dumb. I just think there is a disconnect with this and what the end goal is.
Okay. Olivia, what do you think? Dumb or dishonest?
I'm going to say a mixture of both.
It's usually safe.
Yeah, like Karen Fann says, there's been a lot of things that were not matching up with everything that they're doing. Maricopa County said they were going to do this, and then they didn't do that. That is dishonest. And they owe it to the people to be honest with what they're doing in this auditing process. And I also say dumb, kind of what Cameron said as well. I think that they believe they can play to that the media is always going to be on the side of against the audit. So they think that they're covered that way. The media's got them.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. Okay, Cameron, from the last election in Arizona to the next one next door in California, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so things are really heating up in the recall election the past week. This all kind of started off with conservative talk radio host Larry Elder jumping into the race just a couple of weeks ago. And Secretary of State Shirley Weber released the final list of candidates last week, and Larry Elder was actually left off this list. Now, this actually centered around a statute signed by Gavin Newsom himself a couple years ago in 2019 that required candidates to put out 5 years of tax returns. And this was originally as a way to keep Donald Trump off the ballot in the state. That was deemed unconstitutional by the California Supreme Court, but this statute was still kind of floating around for these state races. So basically what that does is it created a situation where the Secretary of State told Elder, hey, you didn't comply with our tax return laws. So what Elder did and his team did was they brought the Secretary of State to court. The judge said, no, you actually substantially complied with this because the recall elections, it's a special election. These tax return laws have nothing to do with it. So Elder was ordered to be placed on the official ballot. So he'll do that. Now, things got a bit better for him that like hours after, if we can pull up that poll showing him in the lead of this new Nexstar Emerson College poll. Now, there's a lot of candidates in this race, and polling, we still kind of are waiting for more data, more campaigning to take place. There's a debate happening at the end of early next month, but we see Larry Elder with 16% of the vote of the Republican and some Democrat and some independent field of candidates running against Gavin Newsom right now. He's at 10% higher than everyone else in this race right now. So it's a big week for Larry Elder, and we're really starting to see this race formulate right now. So my first question for you guys, I'm going to bring this over to Olivia because she has her campaign experience. I want to ask you guys, what should the GOP be doing right now to ensure that Newsom's going to be removed? The election's on September 14th. What do we do?
So next steps for the GOP right now is focusing on the recall, like you said. And there are about 20 Republicans that are voting on this. And with a recall election, I've been looking into it. What it is there's two questions on it, not just one. One, do we recall and remove Newsom? And two, who is going to replace Newsom if he is replaced? So at this point, we don't even know if he's going to fully be recalled. And then, all of this, the Republicans running, this is a whole nother issue. For next steps, a standard procedure during this time, I would treat this like a primary. So there's 20 Republican candidates running. We need to make sure once that decision is made by the voters, that's when the GOP will get behind one particular candidate. At the moment, the GOP should not be behind any particular candidate themselves because that's just not how campaigns work. We need to wait until that person is chosen by the voters, and then they will endorse someone, because otherwise there's just chaos.
Yeah, so I think Larry Elder actually, the lawsuit probably helped him. That a good chunk of that, he's had good name recognition to begin with, I'm sure. He's been a talk show radio host for quite a while. He's been a columnist. He suspended his column during the campaign, but up until that point, we ran his column on the Western Journal every week. So he's pretty well known just in terms of name recognition. I think being kept off the ballot by this, or the attempt to keep him off the ballot by the Secretary of State, probably helped him, probably increased that name recognition, got some free press out of that, essentially, media coverage. I think if I understood Olivia's reasoning correctly, I think I agree with her. I think the point here is, first things first. The primary message needs to be recall Governor Newsom. The first thing has to be that, and and for a couple of reasons, but one primary one for me is it almost doesn't matter. You could elect a wet rag, and it would be an improvement over Gavin Newsom, right? So, step one is get him out of the office, and almost anybody that you put in there in his place, almost regardless of party, has just about got to be better. He's just he's just been a terrible governor.
What I think is going to be really interesting about this election is because there's so many people running, likely the person that wins is going to be at or below 25% with their winning. Yeah. So that's kind of a historic thing, seeing that.
Yep.
And the thing too here is, I want to pull up the second poll. This was a 5% increase from March. That is very close margin for a state that is very deeply Democratic. That is 5 percentage points right there. We've got till September 14th. They can really make a difference with that. But I'm going to ask my second question for you guys is, everyone in California that's a registered voter is going to get their mail-in ballot. Do we think with that in mind that this recall still has a chance, or is it going to be something where we're going to see this whole field of candidates and we're kind of getting a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of press about it, but it's still not going to amount to anything?
That's a great question. I think the recall itself is what people would be most fired up about. I don't know that there's a great deal of passion for keeping Gavin Newsom in office. So I think there's
even
a lot more passion.
Even the Democrats don't like him.
Exactly. I think there's a lot more passion on the other side. So on the Democratic side, even that vote's going to be split, right? Because you have people, none of the Republicans like him. On the Democrat side, you have people who think he is too far left and people who think he's too far right. And so, it's hard to imagine, but there are people who think that he's too much of a centrist. So he's going to lose the tails on both sides of that equation. And it's the people who are fired up who are going to mail that ballot in. Now, because the margins are so small on the second question as to who is going to be voted in to replace him, I think I would not trust, unless the polling was very, very clear and done like the day before, I don't know that I would trust it very much, because it won't take much to change those numbers. So I much more confidence in the answer to that first question. Is he going to be recalled? And the fact that he's within 5 points of being recalled, according to that poll, if I were Gavin Newsom's people, I'd be pretty nervous right now.
I definitely would be a little shaky about that as well. But it is encouraging to see that movement in the polls from just a couple months ago. However, it's kind of the same dilemma that we're seeing in Arizona and all the elections. Are people able to trust the election? That is really what it comes down to, and we need to restore that faith. So California, all those people trust their election. Arizona trusts their election. The entire United States trusts it again.
Yeah.
And just kind of wrapping up our point here is, there's a big field of candidates. I think originally I was worried about that, but now I think that there's going to be a big voter turnout because people are going to find someone to be excited about.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's something for all tastes kind of in there. That's a really good point. Speaking of all tastes, so how about your taste for your appetite's probably the better word there, for military service. So this has been a topic that's been around for a long time, but suddenly we are talking again about drafting women in the U.S. military, Olivia.
Yeah, so the Senate Democrats have recently moved forward that they would start drafting women again. So the draft has not been used since the Vietnam War, and we don't know when it and if it will be used again, but they are moving it towards women, starting age 18, are going to have to be a part of that draft. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very interesting take. I thought this was going to be happening a while ago. I'm surprised it's happening now. I think it should have happened a while ago. I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, is I don't see anything wrong with it. If that woman is fit and healthy, then she should be able to serve. She's able to serve in the Army already, so why can't she be a part of the draft? This already excludes people that have health problems. So I think that women definitely should be able to do this. What do you think? What is your take on women being added to the draft? And do you think we're going to have a draft anytime soon?
Are we going to have a draft? I think that would, not under the Biden administration, we're not going to have a draft. I don't really see a Democratic administration or Democratic Congress having the stomach for it. I mean, personally, honestly, this is one of those policies I've flip-flopped a little bit on over the years. In general, I'm against the draft. I'm against anything compulsory from anybody, right? Anytime you tell me I have to do something, whatever that thing is, that is a choice I don't get to make, and you have just impinged upon my freedom. So my knee-jerk reaction is always going to be against that. I recognize that there are some situations and some requirements in a lawful society that freedom gets I just can't go and do anything I want to all the time ever, because that's I can be a danger to myself and others doing that, and so that there are reasonable limits that can be put on that. And should be.
I'm thinking, I'm not necessarily for the draft, but if we're having the draft for men, why are we excluding women? So, I mean, this isn't an issue of do we have a draft?
Right.
It's more, no, I mean, ideally, no, we want everybody to decide whether they want to do it.
Yeah.
That's in our American blood. However, if men and women both.
Yeah, I used to actually argue against, argue for women in the draft, because I felt like it was a way to get people to say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it is only fair if we're going to draft men, we should draft women. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to draft women, so therefore we should have no draft. That was, I was kind of for women on the draft for that reason, because I thought it was a good way to undermine the draft completely. Mm-hmm. Now the left, in its complete and total insanity, anything they can do to undermine traditional family roles, gender roles, et cetera, they're going to do that. They love the idea of women in the military. I don't have a problem with women in the military either. I think I still have a problem with women in combat, but I don't have a problem with women in the military. Of course, there were plenty in the military when I served in the Army. So, but over past several years, recent years, there's been a lot of news about women in special operations, women joining SEAL teams. Women, do women even have the physical ability? As a general rule, of course, I'm generalizing, but do they have the same physical ability as men to perform those tasks that are needed by soldiers in combat situations?
That brings me to my next question for you, Cameron. Is this a feminist statement that the Senate Democrats are making? Because, we don't even know if we'll be having a draft. So are they just making a statement that women had the same physical abilities as men and should therefore be able to draft? I mean, because we see that with the transgender agenda, everything like that. They have the same. They're saying there's no gender. So what do you think? Is this a feminist statement?
I would argue it's not a modern feminist statement. I'd argue it's more of an old school feminist statement in a weird way, because I feel like the draft in itself feels outdated. It hasn't been used in a few decades. I don't really see it being used again. And I'll say that because I think if we were to, let's say, if we were to go to war with China tomorrow, that would not be a ground war. That would be a war in the air and on computers.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the way that we are changing warfare with other countries, it's things where we're talking about drones. We're not really drones and cyber attacks. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the future of warfare. So I think when we're kind of in that sense, in a way, I also don't really see an issue with women becoming part of the draft. I think if they're already so prevalent in the military now, I don't really see the issue with it. But I am kind of anti-draft in general, mostly because that kind of that does incentivize the United States government. Hey, we have a whole list of people right here, 18 to 25, ready to go to war, that we can force them to do that. I think that's concerning in of itself, especially because I don't think that men in general now are probably as physically fit as they were probably back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
That's certainly
That is
true.
very true.
I know I'm not
And
as physically fit as I was back in the 60s. So
But I think he's
And
saying
I-
people our age are not as
I
fit.
know.
I know what you mean, but you're right.
And I think there are certain questions we need to ask about that. And I think this is I have no issue with the woman being part of the draft, but I think the draft is such an outdated thing that if any woman is concerned down the line that they're going to get drafted, I know when I fill out my selective service, I'm not really concerned about it because I know that if we were to somehow go to war, there's a good chance I'm not going to be in a trench in China. I'm going to be in a computer in Camp Pendleton in San Diego.
Yeah.
That's probably the more realistic picture of what we would be doing, or flying a plane. So the way warfare is changing, we saw this with Iraq and Afghanistan, is there are ground forces for sure, but there are also, it's becoming more, it's just radically changing. And I feel like the way they're talking about this is in a very outdated manner.
No, you're right. It's sort of a military maximum that the United States military, any military, always prepares to fight the last war. It's that kind of thing. This is, I think, kind of a response to your question, Olivia, that whether this is just is this a feminist move? Is this a political move? Wars are not fought and strategies are not developed by the U.S. Senate. Anything that they're doing about the U.S. military is pretty much anything they do about anything. Pretty much is political. This is something that they think for whatever reason. I mean, who was demonstrating on the streets of Washington, D.C., demanding that women be drafted? I mean, nobody. This is not responsive to anything. It's not responsive to anybody.
Yeah.
Anything anybody wanted. This is purely a political statement of one sort or another. Why now? Who they think they're winning over? What points they think they're scoring? Who knows? But
and I mean, I'll add this too. Is I think if we went full voluntary, it's going to be mostly conservative men that are enlisting.
Yeah, well, I mean,
if we went something like that, that's just a point I wanted to toss out there. Where if we went full voluntary in a situation, time of war, who are the people that are going to be volunteering?
Well, that's how it is now. I mean, it's basically, and it's been that way for I don't know, 45 years. I don't remember when we did away with the draft, but when I was in, there were two kinds of people
Vietnam
who were
War
in.
was the last time we used it.
Yeah, it was just after we got out of Vietnam, I think early 70s. I just don't remember which year it was. But there were two kinds of people when I was in the late 80s, which was, 15 years later. People who had volunteered and wanted to be there and were interested in serving their country. They were patriots. They were generally conservative, et cetera. And then there were people who were sort of drafted. It's not a draft exactly, but when you're standing in court and the judge says, tell you what, this is your third DUI. I'm going to give you two chances. You can go to jail for 90 days or the recruitment station is right around the corner. And that happened. I knew plenty of guys in the military who were in for that reason. It's not a draft. But basically, that was the judge saying, we can punish you and maybe you'll grow up, or you can join the military and maybe you'll grow up. And some of those guys grew up, and some of them never will. Some of them haven't to this day, probably. Anyway, that is about what we have time for today, I will leave you with this thought, though, friends. Do you think that the establishment media, that political elites want you watching a streaming Arizona Senate hearing on the election audit? Do you think establishment political types want you that involved in politics, whether local, state, or federal level? Do you think they want us publishing the truth about the election audit that Maricopa County officials are apparently working overtime to hide? If you're watching the show, you already know the answer to this question. That's why you're watching this show. The Western Journal is on the front lines of that war for American freedom, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, your right to bear arms. You know all of this. Political elites want to take all of this from you. They want to increase their own power, their own money, their own prestige at your expense. That is simply what it is. And I'm going to ask you to spend a little bit of your own prestige and a little bit of your own money to help us fight that war. I'm not going to take it from you the way that the liberal elites will, the way establishment elites will. They just use their power at the point of a gun to take money from your wallet and put it in theirs. It's pretty close to literally what happens. I'm asking you to open your wallet for us, and I'm asking you to open your change purse, except nobody carries those anymore. But if they did, that's what I'd ask you to open. Because for pennies a day, you can go to westernjournal.com/join. You can become a member of the Western Journal. You can support us. And for a limited time, we're going to give you 2 months free. When you pay for 10 months of an annual membership, we're going to give you the other 2 months free. I keep saying for limited time. They literally won't tell me when this deal is ending. I've asked, I don't know. It could be Christmas. It could be Tuesday. I truly have no idea. It could be at 2 o'clock. I don't know when this thing's going to end. So go to westernjournal.com/join. Take advantage of this special deal today. You're getting a great deal. You're getting coverage you won't see anywhere else. And you get the satisfaction of knowing you're supporting us as we fight on the front lines for your freedom. That's what we're interested in doing. We want to equip you with the truth. We want to keep this country a free country where we can talk about ideas just like we did here today without threat of retribution. One last two last programming notes. One, I mentioned earlier, the full interview with Senator Fann will be up, probably is up already on Rumble. You go to rumble.com/The Western Journal, and you should be able to find it there. Should be the last thing we posted. If not, I'm sure you can search and it'll come right up. It will be posted shortly on our YouTube as well. So again, you can go there, search The Western Journal. It'll come right up.
There's also article on the draft and more responses as well on Western Journal that you can find if you're interested about the draft as well. You can look more on Western Journal. All of these topics,
generally speaking, if we're talking about it here, we're talking about it on the Western Journal as well. So you can go to westernjournal.com, search any of these topics, or search any topic you're interested in, and you should find coverage there from people you can trust. So that video will be up there. It's also coming soon, probably early next week. We'll have video of my interview with Michael Flynn. We sat down for about an hour, wide-ranging discussion of all kinds of topics, but basically the situation America's facing now, what you and I can do about that situation. That'll be available soon, so watch for that too. And with that, we will bid you farewell until our next episode. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific to bring you the truth. So we will see you next time on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Stay safe.